Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough.
Everybody, welcome back to Bayou Time. Harry McCullough here. A Patterson man was arrested on attempted murder charges of a Terrebonne Parish Sheriff's deputy. Here to talk a little bit more about that is First Lieutenant Blake Tabor. So thanks for being with us, Blake. A very scary situation.
Absolutely. So, we're glad we don't see this type of behavior very often, but this one was a pretty scary situation. So, again, this case sort of culminated over the last few days. Initially, it started on March 17th, shortly before 10:30 p.m. when we received a call from a local resident in the 200 block of Marina Drive in Gibson. Ultimately, that particular caller had noticed a male subject doing what he believed was illegal narcotics inside of a certain vehicle. He reported that to some people there and also reported that to us. As a result, that unknown male subject allegedly threatened him with a piece of wood or a stick, of course, which prompted the call to us. So again, we responded to that location. We began doing our initial investigation. The preliminary information was that this particular suspect may have been linked to a camper in that area of 200 Marina Drive. So we attempted to make contact at the camper, which was unsuccessful. Up until that point, we had no idea who this male subject was. So again, through just some good old-fashioned police work and proactive patrols, our deputies continued to patrol that area over the next 4 days, ultimately coming into contact with a male subject that matched the description and also a vehicle that matched that description on the morning of March 22nd around 1 a.m. So as our deputy made contact with that particular male suspect, again, he was able to identify him as a Justin Ross Sons, who's a 33-year-old male from Patterson. You see him photographed here. At one point, while the deputy was interacting with Mr. Sons, he attempted to gain entry into that vehicle where the officer tried to stop him from doing so. He was not free to leave. Ultimately, Sons was able to put the vehicle in motion, and the officer began a struggle with Sons inside of the compartment, the driver's door compartment of that vehicle. Ultimately, they began to drive at some pretty slow speeds. But again, any speed with someone hanging out of a vehicle is ultimately dangerous. So at that point, they began to sort of circle an area, we believe, in excess of about 80 yards in length. And ultimately, some evasive maneuvers were made, we feel, on the part of Mr. Sons to sort of disengage the officer or cause that disengaging of the officer from the struggle with him. Ultimately, the officer was jarred from the vehicle and fell to the roadway, where he received some pretty moderate injuries. Good to know that he is recovering from those at this point, but then Sons ultimately fled the area. So a short time later, of course, anytime these type of situations happen, we have a description of a vehicle now. Now we have an identity of a suspect. A bolo goes out and it's all hands on deck. We are out looking for this person, So ultimately, in this case, as we sometimes do, we got very lucky. For whatever reason, Mr. Sons decided that he was going to return back to Marina Drive a short time later, where we were quickly alerted about that. And again, we converged on the area. Ultimately, we used some additional resources in the form of K-9 units, some SWAT team, and additional patrol members. And ultimately, at one point, Mr. Sons tried to exit that particular camper, noticed us there, and then fled the area on foot, where he jumped into a nearby waterway. Of course, once he did that, he quickly was apprehended a short time later and ultimately arrested for attempted first-degree murder of a police officer, resisting an officer by force or violence. And during that investigation, we learned he also had 3 outstanding warrants through the 17th Judicial District. So he was also arrested on those charges as well.
Probably one of the reasons, I guess, he's running because he knew he had other kind of things. But he goes from maybe narcotics charge to now attempted murder.
Absolutely. And this is, again, this is something that we and law enforcement agencies across the country have to take very serious. This was a threat, an obvious threat against this officer's life. We are incredibly grateful that it did not end up in that way. Again, the officer is recovering from his injuries. We believe that it's not going to be any type of injuries that are going to be long lasting. But again, that remains to be seen.
Marina Drive, is that going to the Bayou Black Marina? Is
That's
that where it
correct.
is?
That's
Okay,
correct.
in
In the
Gibson.
Gibson
So
area.
I'm just trying to get familiar where it's at. Yeah, and again, that's also a case, you see it all the time, that when there's an officer trying to stop the vehicle and someone tries to run them over, that also can escalate to where you might use deadly force.
Absolutely. And look, this could have gone a number of ways. We are grateful at this point that it didn't. And we were able to get him into custody safely and also have an officer that's going to be recovering.
Yeah, no, I mean, good police work. You said that started on St. Patrick's Day on the 17th. This
Absolutely.
was 5 days later on the 22nd when they make this.
Just to show you, the level that our officers are willing to go to handle what some would consider a seemingly harmless complaint of someone using drugs. But again, our officers are very dedicated to their job in each and every complaint, and there's not one that's more important than the other. Of course, with that being said, there are violent offenders that we know we have to go after. Mm-hmm. But even those that are reporting drug use, we want people in our parish to know that it's important to report that, and we take it seriously, and we're going to do our job to get that type of action you require.
Yeah, and from a law enforcement standpoint too, that shows you how dangerous your job can be sometimes, right? It started with a stick maybe or a board, and it could have escalated to where this guy didn't come home that night.
Absolutely, and he used that vehicle as a means of bodily injury, serious bodily injury, and we're glad that it ended the way it did, though.
Yeah, no doubt. So
you just never know.
Yeah, you just listen, man.
You just never know. Yeah, obey lawful orders, and things can be de-escalated very quickly.
A lot better. Well, I appreciate it. Blake Tabor, thank you so much for your information.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back with more Bite Time right after this.
Go ahead, man.
Good.